Hey guys, it's Karina with Karina Loves to Plan. Welcome back to my channel. So here I am with a different tray of pens, and thank you guys so much for the comments that you made on my last video about the pens I wouldn't repurchase, and for all of the feedback. And funny enough, I posted that same question on the fountain pens community in Reddit and got really a ton of engagement and a ton of comments, and it was just so great to hear what people would do in their own collections. And it's such a great exercise when looking at your own collection. So here are the pens that if I were to start my collection today, knowing everything I do know, or everything that I've learned in the last 2 years, if I was to start my collection today, this is what I would be okay with it looking like. So let's get started with the first one. The first one being the Pilot Vanishing Point. I do have a note on this though. Like, I love the clicking action of this pen. I love the 18 karat fine Pilot nib because it's just so bouncy and soft and wet. The only thing I would change though, in terms of if I was repurchasing this again, was I would probably buy this in a different finish, either in the black carbonesque or the blue carbonesque, or one of those special edition marble ones. I mean, I would definitely buy another Vanishing Point to put in my collection, but possibly not the gunmetal rhodium. I think I bought it just to get like a neutral color into my collection, but I think I also did a poll on Instagram, if I can remember, and most people went for this one instead of the black carbonesque, and I'm like, why didn't I go with the black carbonesque? I like that one better. But note being, I love this pen. I love the clicking action. It's actually very comfortable in my hand to write with, and I love that fine nib. Out of all of the Pilot gold nibs, this one is my favorite. It is wet, it is soft, it is bouncy. My favorite Pilot nib. So that's the first one I would repurchase in my collection. The second pen that I would repurchase is this Sailor Pro Gear in the white rose gold. This was my second ever Sailor, and I think probably my third gold nib, and I purchased this off of eBay because this wasn't really available in any US retailer, but I think there's a little bit of staining. Yeah, there's a bit of staining there. But what I love about this pen is that, I mean, yeah, you can post it. For me, it's a little back heavy when it's actually, you know what, not too bad when you post it. I prefer not to post my pens, but I could definitely post it and it's not too bad. But what I love about this particular pen is the rose gold detailing and that rose gold nib. How beautiful is that? So this is a 21 karat medium fine nib, and it has that typical Sailor feedback, but it is soft and it is a wet writer. I absolutely love this nib. There is, for me, a huge difference between the 14 karat nib on a Pro Gear Slim versus the 21 karat, and I would go for the 21 karat every single time. Now, I bought this at actually a really great price off eBay. So if I were to buy another Pro Gear, it would be this one off of eBay, because most Pro Gears are so expensive. This one I was able to get at a much better price, and I love this pen. Love this pen. It's such a classy looking pen. I hate that I stained it though, but I would definitely repurchase this. The next one that I would repurchase, it feels like it's going against my whole I like certain pens of a specific size. This is the Pelican 140. It is my one and only vintage pen, and again, I bought this after watching a few videos about vintage pens, vintage Pelicans really. But what attracted me to this was, one, the price compared to a lot of other vintage pens, but two, this nib and this feed is just so unique. Like, look at the way that feed is. But that nib, I believe it is a fine nib, and it looks like it's a stub nib. It looks like it's a stub nib. I'm trying to see what this is, if I can see it on the writing here. Hold on. So I love this particular nib because it is actually bouncy. It's got a little bit of that flex in there, and it's such a wet writer, but also it's still the old make of the Pelican. Yes, there's a few scratches on it. I actually don't mind, but this is a more of a transparent, translucent body, so you can really see the ink volume in there. And I mean, it's not a pen that I can write with for long periods of time because it is quite small, but if I were to own any vintage pen, this is the vintage pen for me. If I was to just have one vintage pen in my whole collection, this is the one that I would repurchase because it's just, I love the nib on it. I love the nib. The next pen also feels like a little bit of a contradiction from the last video, because I said in my last video I would not repurchase the Pelikan M605 in the black tortoise because the M605 or the M600 models are almost that bit too small for me. So why would I repurchase this one? For one, I mean, I love the green. It is beautiful. The main reason I would repurchase this though is that when I purchased this, I purchased the fine nib with a cursive smooth italic grind. So it's like a stub nib, but the edges are just a little bit sharper and it's a little bit slicier. And I remember when I first got this, I wasn't sure whether I would like that sliciness, but now it's one experience that I absolutely love. So this pen I would repurchase, especially for that nib. The combination of that 14 karat fine nib with the cursive smooth italic is something I love, and I love reaching for this combination. But plus there's also something really classy looking about the white and the green and the silver, the rhodium plating here. I just absolutely love that. So this is the Pelikan M605 with green and white stripes with a fine cursive smooth italic. Ooh, need to take a breath. The next one, I don't think this is much of a surprise. This is the Bon Rosa. So this one, I remember I purchased this pen purely based on its looks. Purely based on its looks, not for the fact that it was a functional pen. And for me, I was surprised that I was purchasing a pen at this price point that wasn't a gold nib. I mean, compared to other pens in this price point, it's actually not as expensive, but it's, for me still, to buy a steel nib pen at that price point, over $100, was insane to me. But I love this because this was the first pen that won. I love the way it looks, but it fits just so well in my hand. Look at that. And then the nib, it has a Bach nib on it, and this is a medium nib. However, that's the caveat to this particular choice, is that I would not have purchased this with a medium nib. I'd probably purchase it with a fine or an extra fine if it was offered with one, but I would definitely purchase the Bon Rosa in lilac again because it's an absolutely beautiful resin. The body of the pen fits really well in my hand, and that nib writes beautifully. For a steel nib, I say for a steel nib, there are a lot of steel nibs that write beautifully. And it was that pen, this particular pen, that helped me see that I had a bias against buying pens for its looks. You will see that I have overcome that bias, but this was the pen that really got me over that. And really, like I said, I bought this one purely off of its looks and ended up liking it because of how it fit in my hand and how it wrote. So, the Bon Rosa in lilac. The next one, these two were purchased pretty close together. This is the Bon 325 in the Cambridge model. And I love how classic this looks. And it is a bigger pen, but it fits really, really well in my hand. However, this came with a broad nib, and I had this ground down to a medium stub, which I really, really like. I would do that again, or I would just buy it with a fine nib or get a fine cursive smooth italic on it. So this has a Jovo number 6 steel nib, but just, it fits so well in my hand. It's a beautiful weight, actually. It's not too heavy, and most of these pens, except for the two Pelicans, all of these pens are cartridge converter pens. So for me, having that option of being able to you know, not fill it all the way so that I can change inks regularly is important for me. But I love the classic look of this pen. Having the Jowo nib on there is also, for me, I love Jowo nibs. If they're tuned properly, they're fantastic. And I think this for me is a good, I won't say luxury pen. For some people, this would be a luxury pen because it is over that $100 mark. But I love how classic this looks. And I feel like it's a staple in my collection because one, it has that Jowo nib. But two, this one I could basically take anywhere and it will make a statement just because of how classic it looks. So that is the Le Bon 325 in Cambridge. Oh, okay. So I feel like the first half is very subdued, minus the Le Bon Rosa, very subdued in the way that it looks. And then the second half is a little more like, woo. And I'm gonna say for the last 5 of these pens, there's a little bit of recency bias, but I'll explain that. So the next one that I would buy again, or repurchase again in my collection, is this Cool Tone Primary Manipulation from On a Whim Woodworks. And I remember this is one of the first, I say one of the first, but I've purchased a lot of hand-turned pens. One of the first ones that I purchased at the end of 2022, beginning of 2023. And I remember thinking, am I really gonna like this? Am I actually going to like this pen? And I remember messaging Alan of On a Whim Woodworks and asking him to just take a video of this pen in natural light. And then he basically sent me the video and just turned it just like this. And I was like, done, I'm buying that pen. So this pen actually comes with, I originally purchased it with a medium Bock nib, but I've since replaced it with an extra fine Bock nib from Penrose. So that's another thing that I like, is that Bock nibs, you can change them out. But what I love is that when I hold this pen in my hand, there is just something so cooling and relaxing about it. But I love those swirls. And normally when it comes to a pen, that step up would bother me, but this particular pen does not. There's something about the way that this pen was made, that the way this pen was turned, that it's so comfortable in my hand, and it's just gorgeous, just gorgeous. Other than my Le Bon, this is my only other Bock nib pen, and I really love the way that it writes. It's just a gorgeous pen. So this is the Cool Tone Primary Manipulation, turned by Alan of On a Whim Woodworks. The next one is by a Canadian maker, Hogtown Pens, and this blank is from Turned Pen Co. It is the On the Edge of Ooopsie. And I remember going back and forth with Terry of Hogtown Pens, going, you know, is this a size I want? And, you know, how is this gonna look? But I love this pen because, one, it reminds me of fall and of Christmas at the same time. But I love all of the sparkles in there, and all of the shimmer, and this matches so well with so many different inks. But what I love is that, again, it fits beautifully in my hand. It has a Jowo number 6 extra fine nib that also writes beautifully. I love this pen, and I think that I'd be sad if I didn't have this in my collection. So I would definitely repurchase this one. One, because it looks beautiful. 2, it was made by a Canadian pen maker. And 3, it's one of the most comfortable pens in my hand. So that is my On the Edge of Ooopsie pen by Hogtown Pens. The next one, and I'm sure many of you are not surprised that I have an Esterbrook SD in my collection. I have 3 Esterbrook SDs, but if I had to choose out of the 3, this would be the one that I would repurchase. This is the Esterbrook SD in Petrified Forest, and this has an extra fine nib. My other 2 SDs have fine nibs, but this extra fine nib is just perfect for me. But also the Esterbrook SDs, like just the fit in my hand. And even if I'm placing my finger on this step here and on the threads here, there's no sharp step. So it is so comfortable for me to write with. I can write pages with this and still not feel any pain in my hand. The Extrafine nib on this is smooth and wet, and it also has that cushion cap mechanism in the cap. But I also love all of the colors in the Petrified Forest. You've got the orange, you've got the coral, there's like hints of dusty pink in there. I absolutely love it. So if I had to choose out of all my SDs, this is the one that I would repurchase if I could only purchase or repurchase one. Oh, love it. The last four are ones that I've literally received in the last month, and I have different experiences. Well, I will say that there are different experiences tied to each of them. So the first one is the Water Lily Koi, and this is in the Virgo model by Zodiac Pen Co. And if I were to repurchase this, it would have to be this exact blank with the exact swirls as they are, because purchasing any pens that are hand turned from blanks like this, it's so unpredictable what the finished product will look like just from the look of the blank. But also I've had the nib on this pen ground. It was a fine Yovo nib, and it's now been ground into a fine cursive smooth italic by Jack Hernandez, and the writing experience on this is beautiful. But just look at how that sits in my hand. I remember I did mention that the threads on the section originally weren't helping this close properly, but then Bart of Zodiac Pen Co. sent along a replacement, making this pen absolutely perfect now. So yes, I would repurchase this particular Water Lily Koi because it has the perfect amount of the pinks and the yellows and the greens and the whites. And it's so hard to find the exact combination of the colors that you want, the exact swirls you want. Maybe there's some other people out there who aren't as picky as me, but when it comes to pens like these, there's a certain mix of color that I want. And in the Water Lily Koi, you can have pens that look a little bit more washed out versus other pens that look like the swirls are more tight. This for me was the perfect amount of swirl, and those are the reasons why I would repurchase this, because this really, to me, like, I love just even the little white there, the lime green, and then the pink. It's gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. The next one is also another one from Zodiac Pen Co. in the Virgo model, and this is in the Abalone by Jonathan Brooks of Carolina Pen Co. And same reasons that I would repurchase the one in the Water Lily Koi is because there are so many variations of abalone out there. And Bart of Zodiac Pen Co. actually let me choose between this one or a Mother of Pearl. And while the colors on the Mother of Pearl were beautiful, the way that the swirls were on that pen, I just wasn't a fan of. Whereas this one, you see there's an even distribution of the colors. We've got the purple and the teal and the black and the white, and it's just the perfect distribution, the perfect swirl ratio, if we're gonna break it down that way. It's a perfect swirl ratio for me. And it also has, again, this pen fits really, really well in my hand. It's got an extra fine Yovo nib, and you'll see here that a lot of my pens, really the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pens in here have Yovo nibs, and I'm a big fan of Yovo nibs because they're, 1, interchangeable, 2, they're actually very good quality for a steel nib, and 3, I get a lot of these ground, so that if I get one ground but I want to use it in a different pen, then I can just easily switch them over. So, oh, looks like my nails match. But that is the Zodiac Pen Co. in the Virgo model of the Abalone. The last two, like I said, there is going to be some recency bias in here, but I would definitely repurchase these two. The first one being, this is from Just Turnings. This is the Pastel Primary Manipulation. And I would repurchase this particular one because this is exactly the way I wanted the Pastel Primary Manipulation to look. there's parts of it that are lighter and a bit more translucent, but you have an even mix of the colors here. I ended up selling my other pastel primary manipulation because there was just something that wasn't 100% for me. Whereas this one, as soon as I saw it on Instagram, it was like, bam, that is mine. And the way that Steven turned this, it is comfortable in my hand. It's beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. So I definitely want a pastel primary manipulation in my collection, and this one I would repurchase if it was this exact same one. Now, if I lost this one and had to purchase another one, which is very hard to do because the pastel primary manipulation is so rare now, I would have a hard time finding one that I loved as much as this one. So I would definitely repurchase another pastel primary manipulation, but I would have a harder time finding one that meets this criteria. So this one is turned by Just Turnings and is the pastel primary manipulation by Jonathan Brooks. And then the last one, I would definitely repurchase this one because this one means a lot to me. This one is my really first ever fully custom fountain pen. And this one, I chose the colors of the blank and sent the idea along to Tim of Turned Pen Co. And he had me choose a couple of the colors, and then he turned it, and then he sent the blanks off to Steven at Just Turnings. And I told him I wanted the clip, the metal on the finials, but I also wanted the interchangeable finials as well. So this pen is completely custom. There's not going to be any other pen that looks like it. So I would definitely repurchase it just because, one, I know that it is mine and it also fits beautifully in my hand, but also the whole experience that I had purchasing it, creating the blank, and then working with both Tim and Steven was such a pleasurable experience that I would absolutely do that again, not just for the pen itself, but for the pleasure of working with both of those men. Was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. All right, so I'm looking at this, and if my collection was just these 7, if my collection was just these 13 pens today, I would be very happy with this. And I mean, I look at the pens that are not in this, the ones that are over here and over here, and I'm okay with those not being in my collection if I had to just limit it to these 13, which is crazy for me to say, but this is such a great exercise to do almost seasonally, if not once a year, to look at what you've acquired, look at how your tastes have changed over time, and really see if the collection that you currently have really reflects your current tastes, and if it's really something that you're using on a day-to-day basis. If you are a collector, collect as many as you want. I'm more of a user, and I feel more comfortable with my collection if I'm using every single one of my pens, and I know that I would use every single one of these like a lot regularly. All right, but that is it for me. Thank you for listening to me babble on today. What did you think of my choices? Were you surprised by any of this, or were you like, no, I knew that you were going to choose those ones exactly? So let me know down in the comments below, but also let me know what you would repurchase if you had to start your collection over today, if you had lost everything and had to restart today. All right, that is it once again, and don't forget to hit that like button and to subscribe. Thanks again, everybody, and have yourselves a wonderful day.